So right here, right now, on Diners, Drive-Ins,
and death metal.
Welcome to Tune Fever, baby.
Yep, what's up, everybody? Welcome to today's episode of Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives. Today we're going to talk about death metal, as you can see here on the screen. So first up, we're going to play a little fun activity, kind of like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. But I'm not promising any money because I'm not big enough yet to do giveaways. So what is this city? Now, think about it in your head right now. What do you think it is? And now let's look at the options. So A, we have Columbus / Flavortown, Ohio, which, you know, they're actually thinking about changing the name. And then B, we have Chaz / Chop in Washington. And I know that it's kind of controversial to say that it's in Washington, but, you know. And then next up, we have Wuhan from the People's Republic of China. And they actually made this China symbol. And I actually really love their symbols. I own 3 of their things. That's a 20-inch China with rivets. It's from Wuhan, China. And then our last option is Tampa, Florida. So if you guys guessed Flavortown, you're right, but you're actually wrong. This is Tampa, Florida. And the reason I'm talking about Tampa, Florida is because that is pretty much the birthplace of death metal. So now we're going to talk about what makes death metal death metal. So let's get right into it. First of all, on our list, we have low-pitched screams or the pig squeal. And this is very much a distinctive. It's one of the kind of bigger deals. So death metal is kind of a later 80s thing, is especially when it took off. It came out of Tampa originally. A lot of bands came out of Tampa. You can check out that history, that scene, that's pretty cool. But then, all of them were doing these low-pitched screams, which were kind of unique in the genre of metal. You know, as we're following through our genres that we've covered, you know, the kind of classic heavy metal, and they did kind of an operatic style, and then there was like the thrash metal with the aggression and kind of the punk influence, and then there was like black metal that kind of did some higher pitch, like squealing and you know, that kind of vocal distortion. But here it's really, really low and guttural. Next on the list, it says speed, sure, but also slow and heavy parts, which if you guys take a look at this meme that's here on the right, that's kind of what I'm talking about. Death metal wasn't afraid to get really slow and heavy, and that made a really big difference. It became kind of a really impactful piece of what death metal became. So that's very important. And then the lyrics, they get a little nasty and oddly specific. So a lot of the lyrics are about things like gore and violence, and specifically they'll like start talking about body parts, and they'll literally like get surgical sometimes. So it's like, that's really, really specific, you know, whenever you look at some of these lyrics about like entrails being ripped out, and you know. So the lyrics, they're violent and often gory and very, very kind of specific. That's kind of something about death metal that you'll find. The brutality of it is kind of increased. So next on the list we have lower tuned guitars, more strings. Yeah, you're gonna start to see people tuning their guitars lower, because lower pitched guitars mean heavier. And it's kind of like, here, I have an example. You guys, I hope you can see this. This is a ukulele. And then, so like, think of this in the example as like what guitars most metal musicians used. And then I have this, which is a baritone ukulele. So it's lower pitched. And that's a good example of what I mean here. So moving on from there, they want to crush you. So a lot of their music, it's meant to be really, really kind of physical and impactful. and that's just kind of something that they're always going for. And so there will be a lot of really pummeling double bass, a lot of like really like guitar tones and stuff will have like a really heavy like articulation, which you can do with things like palm muting and stuff. But it's kind of like an assault on the senses in a way. It's very cool. Next up, so a staple thing about death metal, really long hair and the windmill. So during these like really pummeling sections, you'll see these guys, they'll do the windmill, which is literally like this with their hair, and it just goes flying in circles. That's kind of something about death metal, and a lot of these bands, they have this really long hair and it just kind of drones all over their face. But yeah, that's just something fun. And then we have blast beats, which is kind of what I was talking about earlier when I was talking about the pummeling double bass, but then also the blast beat, which you'll find in other kinds of metal, especially black metal. They do a lot of blast beats, but they're definitely here too, which is that basically that really, really fast on the snare, and it's kind of like repetitive, just like intensely fast. Just anything because they want to crush you. That's really what they're going for. So next up, we have my recommendations. We are to that phase of the video. So as y'all know who watch this series, we do 2 classics within the subgenre, and then 2 of my personal favorites within it, and then 2 that I just find interesting for some reason. So, and I'm recommending these to you guys. So kind of it's like a death metal starter pack, just kind of to provide a pleasant experience, kind of diving into the sound and beginning to understand what death metal is all about. And yeah, so let's get into it. First up is the classic album Leprosy by Death, which is from 1988. Death is one of those bands out of Florida, in the Tampa area, Orlando. Chuck Schuldiner, he's the singer and guitar player. Absolutely wild. Unfortunately did die at age 34. I know he was diagnosed with brain cancer. It's probably something related to that. Obviously very, very unfortunate. They had a good career, and so many albums by them are just absolute classics in their own right. This is the debut. From 1988. This album, someone's here. Hi. Cool. So this album does the slow fast thing, like I was saying, for sure. It's very kind of innovative in that way. And just the vocals are completely nuts, and I love the tone of the bass on it. Yeah, Death is just super heavy. And then as they went later into their career, they kind of got more and more progressive as well, incorporating some kind of unique stuff into their music. Death is one of those bands, it's just worth it to listen to their entire discography, so go ahead and do that. But Leprosy is a great place to start. I'd say my favorite Death album is probably Human, but Leprosy, it's probably the most classic and very, very important album by Death. So full recommendation there. Absolute classic. Next up, we have this album by Entombed called Left Hand Path. Now, this one, I'll bring up that there's a whole death metal scene coming out of Sweden. Yeah, Swedish death metal. And this is not the last you'll hear of Sweden on my list. But yeah, this album, it's there's something about the guitar tone that kind of distinguishes it from a lot of the American death metal, which is that it kind of sounds like a buzzsaw or a chainsaw or something. There's just kind of a different tone to the guitar. But yeah, it's nasty. This album has a lot of atmosphere, a lot of kind of that dark atmosphere, sort of like the type of atmosphere you'd hear in black metal, that kind of quality. So it has some of that makes it really interesting. Yeah, this is an album that's full of darkness, and it's quite delicious. So have a listen to that. Really, really good. Next, we'll get into some of my personal favorites. So this one is an EP by the band called Vader, one of my very favorite death metal bands. I would say yeah, they're definitely one of my very favorites. I love a lot of stuff by Vader. This is their EP. It's called Blood. But yeah, this EP to me is kind of the epitome of what that death metal sound is. I just think that this is the perfect recommendation. Like if you kind of want, okay, let me say this. Particularly death metal drumming is peaked here. This album has some of the greatest drumming from a guy called Doc, who did pass away. Vader has some lineup changes, but in this case, yeah, this is one of the drummers Doc's final releases with the band. I don't think it's his very final, but it's one of the later ones. But this drummer absolutely destroys the kit on this EP. This is just really my favorite. Check out Vader, and they're from Poland. And yeah, this particular one's from 2003. Let's see. Did I say what year the Entombed one's from? If I didn't, it's 1990. So then there's this Bloodbath album right here that I just clicked up. Nightmares Made Flesh, and this one is from 2004. So this is another one from Sweden. This one, it's really I love the guitar riffs in this one. They're some of the best black metal riffs to me. It's all about those kind of dissonant intervals between the chords, but they also did kind of some interesting timing that I think are kind of you're starting to see roots of things that are beginning to be something like tech death. I mean, just starting. It's not quite tech death, and tech death is something I'll talk about in the future once I get a little more niche. What I'm trying to do right now at the beginning of my metal series is cover the big categories and then get into the niche subgenres later. But yeah, this album, I really love the guitar playing on it in particular. It's that kind of buzzsaw chainsaw thing that Sweden's kind of known for. It's in terms of what differentiates them from kind of American death metal. So that's very important. Okay, so the next one. Okay, here we go. So I made an interesting. I have to admit that okay, so I made this YouTube video on this channel that maybe some of you have seen. It's called My Favorite Music of 2019, and I forgot to put this one on it. And that's just sad to me because I wish I would have. But, I couldn't remember all of it. I tried my best. But it's here, at least. So at least I get to talk about it. So it's from 2019. This is a band, Blood Incantation, with their album Hidden History of the Human Race. And they're from Denver, Colorado. And it's so interesting because not many bands right now are kind of doing the classic death metal sound, or at least doing that classic death metal sound like Any Justice. But this band is really doing it in kind of an interesting way. They kind of have like a cosmic approach to it, like they're the space theme and the kind of sci-fi, which I'm totally here for. They're doing some interesting work. But yeah, this is really an amazing death metal album that I like spending time with, and I'm looking forward to spending more time with it. And yeah, I just feel bummed that I forgot to include it in my favorite music of 2019 video because it should have been there. But yeah, our last one on the interesting category, it's Obituary, Slowly We Rot. It's from 1989. Yeah, I think so. But it's another band from Tampa. Obituary, Slowly We Rot. And the reason I think that they're so interesting is because the vocal style on this one, it literally just sounds like he's throwing up. So it's sort of acquired taste, you could say. You could also say that it's a little more like straightforward songwriting, but it's a really good album. And Obituary has several good albums, but yeah, this one from 1989 is a good one to get into them with. But yeah, the vocal style will hit you right up front. I really do love it though. I really do love it. It took some time to get used to it because it literally just sounds like he's throwing up into a toilet. Yeah, it's just kind of a unique take on that low guttural death metal growl. But yeah, I fully recommend all 6 of these, and yeah, there you go. So yeah, here we have my sources cited, as I like to do. Yeah, so there's Death, and Entombed, Invader, and Bloodbath, Blood Incantation, and Obituary. So please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe on this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.